the cost to build a standalone house is around 50% more expensive in New Zealand than it is in Australia. I'm Josh, a builder here in New Zealand, and in this video here, we'll look at building costs in New Zealand, we'll compare them to our big brother, Australia, and stick around to the end of the video where we'll explain why there is such a big difference. What are some of the reasons it costs so much to build in New Zealand? Well, first up, you've got our geography, and that's two ways. Number one, we're a little island nation at the bottom of the world. So we're off all the major trade routes. It's a bit of a mish to get here. Therefore, it's a bit expensive to get stuff here. On top of that, our geography, once you are here, I don't know if you've seen, but a lot of the sites we're building on are slopes. In Wellington especially is quite common. There's a shortage of flat land in Wellington. There's probably a shortage of good flat land in New Zealand. And because a lot of it we're protecting for nature, that's awesome. So you start to have smaller and smaller areas you can build up, and you either intensify those areas or you go up onto the hills. The second reason I think New Zealand is expensive to build is regulations. We have an insane, strict process to follow with our government and our local council, and then because we are an earthquake-prone country, we engineer the heck out of everything we build. I think what I've seen in regulation is we flip-flop from one extreme to the other. There was a period in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s where there was stuff all regulation, and a bunch of leaky, shoddy homes got built and slipped through the cracks. And then there was a huge fallout from that, and they've gone the other way where things now are so well built and there's so many layers to building that it's complicated. On top of that, engineering. You've seen the house we're doing that's literally holding up the hill. There is so much engineering in that, and even the engineers are blown away when they come onto site. But they're following a model, and someone at a high up level has set the model, has set the rules, and we're all just ticking the boxes. Other regulations such as every site needs to control its own stormwater. So now we're spending 5 to 10 grand putting stormwater retention tanks on every single site. Sure, it's a great idea, it solves a problem, but it adds cost. Now each home costs at least 10 grand more because of that rule. And the thing is, they are adding more and more rules every year. I believe there's been a significant underinvestment in public infrastructure here in New Zealand as opposed to some countries like Australia. And so if the public infrastructure was handled at a government level and set up to handle the growth and handle the people, then it wouldn't be the homeowner's responsibility, it wouldn't be the homeowner's cost. Sure, they can pay that back in taxes or rates or something else, but all of that infrastructure cost is getting bundled into the build cost right now. You know, it doesn't cost you anything, but only 22% of you have done it? The subscribe button. Guys, what are the other 78% of you up to? Go ahead, click subscribe. It really does encourage us to keep making these videos. The third reason it costs more to build here in New Zealand is the labour market. Kiwis are a very talented bunch of DIY, get stuck in, learn a bunch of stuff, and then bugger off overseas and work somewhere else. And so we have a shortage of skilled people who understand New Zealand, who understand New Zealand regulation, and who just want to work hard. Basically, there's a scarcity of people who can do the work well and on time, and then that drives up the price of the people who are left who can do that. And lastly, materials. I think materials cost a lot for two reasons. Number one, a large amount of it's getting sent into the country. We don't produce here in New Zealand as much as we used to. It's getting imported. When it gets imported, there's a cost to getting it to the country. There's also a cost of the middleman. I think sometimes we have a middleman on a middleman on a middleman. Each one of those people has a margin they add to run their business and make a profit, and that's fair. Everyone's allowed to run a business and make a profit. But with materials, the other thing is we don't have economies of scale. There's only 5 million of us here, I think, versus let's say 24 mil in Oz and 360 mil or something in USA, and then Canada, which can get bundled into that and piggyback off the USA's rates. I think Canada is like 30 to 40 mil or something like that. But compared to those countries, we are the little brother that's in a far-flung land away from everyone. So we're no economies of scale. We're a small island nation. We're hard to get to. We've got a shortage of skilled people. So that all adds up to last year, 2024, the average build cost in New Zealand was about 3.5 to 4K a square. Now that would ring true with the contracts I'm signing up and the clients I'm building for, and that's backed up here in this article. So how does that compare to Australia? Building costs are as low as 1,500 to 3K a square. Quick disclaimer, obviously this is just the facts I can research online. This is according to the couple of sources we found. If you're from Australia and you're building, comment below. How big did you build? How many square meters did you build? How much did it cost? Tell us your square meter rate. You can see straight off the bat, that's about half of what it's costing in New Zealand. You do need to remember there's some regional variations in there. For example, building in Sydney is going to cost more per square meter than building in the Boondocks, where it's probably going to be a little bit less, or well, I don't know, Brisbane. Brisbane sounds like it's cheap to build. So why is it costing so much less to build in Australia? Again, I'm just a builder, but I've got 3 ideas. Number 1, their building code is nowhere near as intense as New Zealand. For most of Australia, they don't have to think about things like earthquakes the way we do. Their labour market is a lot larger. They're attracting a lot of awesome Kiwis going over the ditch and working over there to chase the big bucks. They're probably not only attracting New Zealanders, they're attracting a bunch of people from around the world. They want to come, they want to work hard, they want a good life in Oz. You tell me, is it a good life? And number 3, we touched on this before, materials. Again, because of their size, they can do 2 things. They can produce more in-house, in country, and they have better economies of scale of importing the things that they need. Being almost 5 times larger than us, they can just command a better price on things. It's basic economics. From what I've also observed, it's easier to run a business over there. There is more support from the government. I think Australia in general makes a lot of money from their natural resources, and they pump a lot of that money back into the local economy. One really important thing to note on the cost per square metre though, is that Australians on average build larger homes than New Zealand. And the thing with cost per square metre in Australia or New Zealand is that the bigger the house becomes, the cheaper it becomes per square metre to build. And that's because you're averaging fixed costs, such as the drain layer and the permit fees and all of that over a larger amount of square meterage. Based on the knowledge I have about wages, I'm of the opinion that people get paid more in Aussie, but there must be something about how much they're getting paid versus what they're producing, some sort of productivity ratio that's better on the Australian side. There's a bunch of factors that are outside of our control that are important to note as well. I'm thinking things like exchange rates and import-export tariff and GST and a bunch of things. Like this government is charging all these taxes and got all these rules. This one's here. This dollar's worth this much. This dollar's worth this much. This one fluctuates this much. This one's relatively stable. All of those things are affecting the price on the ground when we walk into the shop. And then we've got the good old weather. Do you Aussie guys even know what rain is? Do you know how to work in the rain? So you tell me, have I nailed why it costs less in Aussie than New Zealand? Side-by-side comparison, average cost in New Zealand, 3,750 per square metre. Average price in Aussie, 2,250 per square metre. That rings true with Chris Pink's article. Maybe we need to do like a Bunnings comparison. If you're an Aussie creator and you're watching this, hit me up. Let's do a side-by-side Bunnings Australia, Bunnings New Zealand cost comparison. I personally think New Zealand is an awesome place to live, raise a family, run a business. I love it, and I'm in no hurry to leave. I still want to see it get better. I want to see it easier to build homes. I want to see more people in new homes. I want to see it easier to run businesses. There's got to be more incentive to keep good, skilled New Zealanders home. Yo, so you've made it to the end. That means you're part of the sign-off squad. First up, thanks for watching all the way to the end. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. The thought that pops to mind after filming this video is that Whether you live in Australia or whether you live in New Zealand, and no matter what it costs to build a home, at some point you've got to choose to settle your roots down somewhere and make the most of that. For me, that was Upper Hutt, Wellington, New Zealand. For you, that could be Sydney, Australia, or Vancouver, Canada. Wherever you are, there's always going to be somewhere that's going to cost more, and there's always going to be somewhere that costs less. But at some point you need to say, this is where I am, and this is what I'm going to do to make the most of it. For me, I came home to New Zealand and I got stuck into building. And then I decided to stay in my hometown and build on the existing relationships I had. I think the thing is, the grass is greenest where you water it. And so at some point you need to say, right, this is my home, this is my grass, I'm going to water it. Yeah, so stop leaving New Zealand.